Good morning, everybody. So today is Wednesday, January 6th, and we are on John Henry and Module 2 still. So go ahead and make sure that you have your knowledge and response journal out and ready. We're going to work on page 89 today. So go ahead and get your journal and number page 89. And I'm actually going to go ahead and show you what your pages look like, so that you can get that copied down before we get started. Okay, so hold on one second. I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. We are going to be on page 89 today. To put today's date on the top, which is 1-6, and the title of our story, John Henry by J. Lester. And then what you need to do is you need to make this little chart. You're going to write words and illustration, make it into like a T-chart, put when and where, and then you need to draw your house for the setting, a little person for the characters, and then we're going to put 3 E's for event, event, event. Okay, so go ahead and pause your video so that you can get this chart copied down on your page 89, and then hit play when you are ready to continue. Okay, so what we are going to do now is we are going to go ahead and get started on our video. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, here we go.
Welcome back, incredible thinkers. I'm Sue Sabella, your Great Minds teacher. Let's see what we need for today. Today we'll need handout 28B. It's called Revise for Topic-Specific Words, your journal, and a pencil. If you'll be using a paper copy of your handout, you'll also want to grab 4 colors, and you can use colored pencils or markers or crayons. We'll need blue, yellow, green, and red. So pause here to gather those now and just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so you do not have a copy of handout 28B. So what we're going to do is we're just going to watch Miss Bella while she is instructing us with that handout. So that means you also do not need the red, yellow, blue, and green. Okay.
There are many events in John Henry, and today we're going to take a closer look at those events, and we're also going to incorporate or add those events into our recounting. Let's get started. Read this question to yourself.
What is happening in this text?
What is happening in this text? Let's look at those big events. As we dig into John Henry by Julius Lester, we'll use the story elements and the story stones to help us think about this text. We'll begin with the setting and then move to the character and then the main events in this text. Let's get your journal set up. We're going to set it up the same way we set it up for the Keats version of John Henry, an American Legend. We'll have words on the left side and illustrations on the right. Please pause here to set up your journal and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. As I read page 5 and page 6, I want you to focus on the following section in your journal. I want you to focus on the setting and also the main character. As I read, please keep this question in mind. What is special about this setting in this version of John Henry? Ready? Here we go. You have probably never heard of John Henry, or maybe you heard about him but don't know the ins and outs of his comings and goings. Well, that's why I'm going to tell you about him. When John Henry was born, birds came from everywhere to see him. The bears and the panthers and the moose and deer and rabbits and squirrels, and even a unicorn came out of the woods to see him. And instead of the sun tending to its business and going to bed, it was peeping out from behind the moon's skirts, trying to get a glimpse of the new baby. Before long, the mama and papa come out on the porch to show off their brand new baby. The birds oohed and the animals awed at how handsome the baby was. Somewhere in the middle of one of the oohs, or maybe it was on the backside of one of the ahs, that baby jumped out of its mama's arms and started growing. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until his head and shoulders busted through the roof, which was over the porch. John Henry thought that was the funniest thing in the world. He laughed so loud the sun got scared. It scurried from behind the moon's skirts and went to bed, which is where it should have been all the while. Pause here to jot and to draw. Remember to focus on the setting and also the main character. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so the main character, obviously, is who? John Henry, okay? And when and where did the story take place, guys? When and where did this story take place? Oops. I would want to exit. Okay, so if we look at my chart, nobody laughed at my illustrations. So we know that John Henry was the main character. And so I drew my John Henry. We know that the story took place when was at the time of John Henry's birth. It says that exactly in the story. And where it takes place is at John's house. And there's a lot of animals making sounds, and the sun is trying to come out. So here's my son. I drew my son trying to come out. And I remember it specifically saying that a unicorn came out to greet him when he was born. So I drew a unicorn. So what I want for you to do is pause the video. You're going to tell me when and where the setting is and who the main character is, and then draw your illustrations for the setting and the main character, the primary character, okay? And then when you are finished, you may push play and resume the video.
Now that we have a good understanding about the main character and how the story began because of the setting, we can dive into an event that happened in the middle of the legend. As I read pages 10, 11, 12, and 13, I want you to keep this question in mind. What are we learning about John Henry as he faced Ferret Face Freddy during the race? Remember, you can always pause to jot or to draw and then just hit play to continue listening to this section. Ready? Here we go. The next day, John Henry went to town. He met up with the meanest man in the state, Ferret-Faced Freddy, sitting on his big white horse. You know what he was doing? He was thinking of mean things to do. Ferret-Faced Freddy was so mean, he cried if he had a nice thought. John Henry said, "Freddy, I'll make you a bet. Let's have a race. You on your horse, me on my legs. If you or your horse win, you can work me as hard as you want for a whole year. If I win, you have to be nice for a year." Ferret-Faced Freddy laughed an evil laugh. "Ha ha ha! It's a deal, John Henry." His voice sounded like bat wings on tombstones. The next morning, folks lined up all along the way the race would go. John Henry was ready. Ferret-Faced Freddy and his horse were ready. Bang! The race was on. My great-granddaddy's brothers, cousins, sister-in-laws, uncles, aunt was there that morning. She said everybody saw Ferret-Faced Freddy ride by on his big white horse, and they were sure enough moving. Didn't nobody see John Henry? That's because he was so fast. The wind was out of breath trying to keep up with him. When Ferret-Faced Freddy crossed the finish line, John Henry was already on the other side, sitting in a rocking chair and drinking a soda mom. After that, Ferret-Faced Freddy was so nice, everybody called him Frederick the Friendly. What did we learn about John Henry during this race with Ferret-Faced Freddy? Be sure to pause here to jot and to draw, and just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so what did we learn? We learned that John Henry raced against Ferret-Faced Freddy, and he wins. And so Freddy has to be nice for an entire year. So on your chart, so we know that the first event was that he races Ferret-Faced Freddy and he wins. And so here's my illustration of this. Obviously is John Henry, and that's Ferret-Faced Freddy, and they're racing. You see how I use those lines to show the wind from where they're moving so fast.
Let's continue through the middle of this legend on page 14. As I read this page aloud, I'd like you to keep this question in mind. How does John Henry get his hammers? After I read page 14, we'll pause so you can jot down and draw to capture this event in your journal. Ready? Here we go. John Henry decided it was time for him to go on down the big road. He went home and told his mama and daddy goodbye. His daddy said, "You gotta have something to make your way in the world with, son. These belong to your granddaddy." And he gave him two 20-pound sledgehammers with 4-foot handles made of whalebone. A day or so later, John Henry saw a crew building a road. At least that's what they were doing until they came on a boulder right smack dab where the road was supposed to go. This was no ordinary boulder. It was as hard as anger and so big around it took half a week for a tall man to walk from one side to the other. Pause here to jot down words and also to create an illustration that captures this event. Remember, you can always scroll back on the timeline if you need to. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so what did we learn about how John Henry got his hammers in this section of the story? Sorry about my messy desk, guys. All right, so we learned that, let's go back for a second. I added this onto this one, that Freddie has to be nice for a whole year. So we learned that he gets his hammers from his dad. And why were they important hammers? Because they were his granddaddy's hammers. And after he gets them, he leaves home. He left home. And so here's my picture of John Henry when he got his two 20-pound hammers. And when I'm thinking of a 20-pound hammer, I think they're pretty darn big. So that's why I drew them to be really large. So make sure that you have written information for the two events, and then you draw your own illustration for those two events. Okay, here we go. The third event we're going to talk about.
As I read from page 32 until the end of this legend, I'd like you to keep this question in mind. How does this legend end? What's happening at the end of this story? Be sure to jot down your words and to create illustrations. Feel free to pause along the way if there's something you'd like to jot or draw in your journal. I'll pause again when I'm finished reading this section. Here we go. All through the night, John Henry and the steam drill went at it. In the light from the tongues of fire shooting out of the tunnel from John Henry's hammer blows, folks could see the rainbow wrapped around the mountain like a shawl. The sun came up extra early the next morning to see who was winning. Just as it did, John Henry broke through and met the steam drill. The boss of the steam drill was flabbergasted. John Henry had come 1.25 miles. The steam drill had only come 1/4. Folks were cheering and yelling, "John Henry! John Henry!" John Henry walked out of the tunnel into the sunlight, raised his arms over his head, a hammer in each hand. The rainbow slid off the mountain and around his shoulders. With a smile, John Henry's eyes closed and he slowly fell to the ground. John Henry was dead. He had hammered so hard and so fast and so long that his big heart had burst. Everybody was silent for a minute. Then came the sound of soft crying. Some said it came from the moon. Another one said she saw the sun shed a tear. Then something strange happened. Afterward, folks swore the rainbow whispered it. I don't know, but whether it was a whisper or a thought, everyone had the same knowing at the same moment. Dying ain't important. Everybody does that. What matters is how well you do your living. First, one person started clapping, then another and another. Soon, everybody was clapping. The next morning, the sun got everybody up early to say goodbye to John Henry. They put him on a flatbed railroad car and the train made its way slowly out of the mountains. All along the way, folks lined both sides of the track, and they were cheering and shouting through their tears, "John Henry! John Henry!" John Henry's body was taken to Washington, D.C. Some say he was buried on the White House lawn late one night while the president and the Mrs. President was asleep. I don't know about none of that. What I do know is this. If you walk by the White House late at night, stand real still and listen real closely. Folks say you might just hear a deep voice singing, "I got a rainbow ring, ring, tied round my shoulder, ring, ring. It ain't gonna rain, no, it ain't gonna rain, ring, ring." Pause here to capture that last event. Make sure to include words that came directly from the story, and also take time to draw an illustration that captures the end of this story. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so take a few minutes and think about the last part of this book. What happens? What's the big event? Okay, so I wrote that the last big event was that he races against a steam drill and he wins the race, but his heart gives out and he died. And that many say that he was buried at the White House. And so here's my illustration. This is John Henry after he has emerged from the tunnel with his hammers raised up in the air and he's saying, "Yeah!" And he's really excited right before his heart gave out. So make sure that you have this information written on your chart, and then you may do your own illustration for the last event of the book. And then when you're ready, just hit play to continue.
By looking closely or studying the main events in this legend, we learned a great deal about John Henry. We can use story elements like setting, character, and events to build or create a recounting. A recounting can be written or it can be oral, which means that we speak the recounting out loud. Listen to me build a recounting out loud using my notes from my journal for support. And then you'll have a chance to practice your recounting with your notes from your journal and your illustrations, or you might choose to use my notes here. It's completely up to you. Ready? Here we go. In the beginning, John Henry was born. He was born in a house that was surrounded by lots of animals. And the sun wanted to come out to meet John Henry. Then John Henry raced Ferret-Faced Freddy, and he won. Freddy had to be nice for a whole year. Also, John Henry helped to build roads. He used his hammers to clear away a giant boulder. At the end, John Henry thought he could beat the steam drill. He beat the steam drill. He won. But he worked so hard that his heart gave out and he died. Some folks even think that he was buried on the White House lawn. Now it's your turn. You can use the words and illustrations from your own journal to create and practice a recounting. Or you can use the words from my journal here. I'll leave the linking words up on the screen to guide your recounting. And I encourage you to practice your recounting more than one time. You can practice it out loud to yourself, or you can practice it with a learning partner or a prized possession. Then you have a choice. You can either share your recording with your classroom teacher, or you can jot down your recounting in paragraph form. I encourage you to reach out to your classroom teacher if you have any questions about your recounting and how to share that with your classroom teacher. Please pause here to practice your recounting and also to create the recounting that you'll be sharing with your classroom teacher. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so what we are going to do is you may choose if you would like to use the stuff that's on the screen right now that Miss Sabella did. I noticed that she wrote something different than we wrote. She did a different event, like she talked about how he got his hammers, but she wrote about how he used his hammers. So this one's a little bit different from what we wrote in our journal. So you can use what Miss Sabella has on the screen, or you can use what we have in our journals, okay? So I'm going to model for you how to use the one in our journal. Okay, so remember, we're going to start at the beginning. So I'm going to say, okay, so it's in the beginning. The story started when John Henry was born. He was born in his house, and there were lots of animals making sounds around the house and trying to come in and see him. And the sun was even trying to come out, and a unicorn even came to see him. Then he raced against Ferret-Faced Freddy because he thought he could beat him. And he did. He won the race. And so Freddy had to be nice for a whole entire year. Also, before John Henry left home to go out on his own, his dad gave him his granddaddy's big hammers. They were 20 pounds each. And at the end of the story, John Henry decides to race against a steam drill to build a tunnel through the mountain. And John Henry worked so hard, he won that race. But his heart worked so hard that it gave out, and John died. Some people say that he was buried at the White House, and they can still hear him singing if you walk by it. So you are going to choose if you want to use what we wrote in our journal, or if you want to use what Miss Sabella wrote in her journal. Okay, it's up to you. But what you need to do is make a decision and then pause and then do your story retelling. And then you may hit play to continue.
This is a perfect time for a stretch break. Pause here to take a stretch break and just hit play when you're ready to continue. Let's read this question together. How do I write to explain differences between texts? If you have a paper copy of handout 28B, go ahead and pause now to grab that copy and also to grab 4 colors: blue, red, green, and yellow. And remember, they could be crayons, colored pencils, or markers. If you're using a digital copy, no worries. You can follow along on the screen with me. Pause here to gather what you need and just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so remember, we do have this copy of this page. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen carefully to Miss Sabella and follow along with her as she is modeling for us how to do this.
Just like John Henry, Johnny Appleseed is also a legend, and the setting is in the American West. Today, we're going to take a look at an informative paragraph that compares two versions of Johnny Appleseed. It's important to note that we did not read two versions of Johnny Appleseed as we explored the American West, but we will use this paragraph that compares two versions of Johnny Appleseed so we can take a look at the structure in this paragraph. Let's zoom in to take a closer look. As we review this paragraph that compares two versions of Johnny Appleseed, we're going to locate the introduction, the topic statement, the first point, the second point, and also the conclusion. Whenever I'm reviewing a paragraph, whether it's someone else's paragraph or my own, I always read the whole paragraph through to get a really good idea of what the paragraph is about. That will help me be able to locate all the different parts of the paragraph. As I read this paragraph aloud, listen to what the paragraph is about. Try to determine the topic, the big idea of this paragraph. Here we go. Alike and Stephen Kellogg tell the story of Johnny Appleseed. Both books show how John Chapman moved west to plant a bunch of apple trees, but the versions have many differences. Alike says Appleseed moved west after people were settled. Kellogg says he went to the new places before the pioneers. Also, Alike says the Indians helped Appleseed when he was sick. In the Kellogg version, people helped him get well. Authors tell different versions of Johnny Appleseed's story. Pause here to do some powerful thinking or to chat with a learning partner. What is this paragraph about? What's the topic? Just hit play once you have a chance to think or chat.
Okay, so what do you guys think? What is the main topic of the statement? What is it about? So this paragraph is describing the differences between the two versions of the story, okay? So let's see which one you think is going to be the introduction and which one do you think will be the topic statement. I want you to tell your learning partner. Remember, the introduction is very broad and it kind of just tells you a little bit, and the topic statement tells you specifically what the paragraph is going to be about. Okay, so which one do you think is the introduction? And which do you think is going to be the topic statement? Now let's see what Miss Sabella has to say. Let's see if you were right, okay? Check your predictions.
The topic is both books show how John Chapman moved west to plant a bunch of apple trees, but the versions have many differences.
So were you right? Is that what you chose? I thought that the introduction was going to be that Alike and Stephen Kellogg tell the story of Johnny Appleseed, because that's very broad. That doesn't really tell me what the rest of the paragraph is going to be about. It just kind of introduces the fact that I'm going to be talking about Johnny Appleseed and how these two authors wrote about him. The topic statement tells me more information, more detail about this is what I'm going to be writing about Johnny Appleseed. and it's about how he moved west to plant apple trees. But they have differences in each version. So what do you think is going to be the first point in this story? What's the first piece of evidence to show that Johnny Appleseed moved west to plant a bunch of apple trees?
Pause here to locate the first point and the second point that support the topic statement. Remember, the points can be in more than one sentence. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so look for the first and the second points to decide how Johnny Appleseed or John Chapman moved west to plant apple trees.
Aliki says Appleseed moved west after people were settled. Kellogg says he went to the new places before the pioneers. Also, Aliki says the Indians helped Appleseed when he was sick. In the Kellogg version, people helped him get well.
Okay, so were you correct? Did you predict the correct evidence sentences, the first point and the second point? If you did, congratulations. Good job. All right, so now we're going to work on the conclusion. Which one do you think is going to be the conclusion?
Pause here to locate the conclusion and also the introduction. Just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, so these should be fairly simple at this point. The conclusion goes where? The conclusion goes at the end. And what is the only sentence left at the end of this paragraph? That authors tell different versions of Johnny Appleseed's story. And remember, the conclusion just kind of restates the topic statement. The topic statement talked about how it talks about Johnny Appleseed's story and how that there are differences, different versions of Johnny Appleseed's story. So then what is the introduction going to be? It's going to be that very first sentence at the top. Let's see if we are correct. Let's see if our predictions are right.
The conclusion reminds the readers of the topic and the topic statement. And the introduction or introductory statement provides some background. It almost sets the table for what's to come. In this example, the introduction or introductory statement introduces both authors and that they told the story of Johnny Appleseed. Please pause here to check your work if you've been using a paper copy, and just hit play when you're ready to continue.
Okay, hold on one second. I'm sure you may have noticed that I picked up my marker and it flew across the screen. Hold on. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Have you guys noticed that this time the introduction is red, not the conclusion? The conclusion and the topic statement are both green because they relate to each other, okay? So you need to make sure that well, you're not doing it, we're just watching. But so Miss Sabella has the conclusion in red, and then the topic statement, the introduction in red, and then she has the topic statement and the conclusion together in green because they relate to each other. All right, so we're going to go ahead and finish up our lesson. We're almost finished.
Wow, you truly are growing as a reader and as a writer. As a reader, you're identifying and understanding multiple events in a story. And also, as a writer, your writing is becoming much more sophisticated, which means you're adding very important pieces to your paragraph. I'm so proud of you, and I can't wait to continue to learn and grow with you. I will see you again soon, my friends.
Okay, so that is the end of today's video lesson. So all that you need to make sure that you do today in your journal is just make sure you have page 89 completed, okay? And then you are going to upload a picture of page 89 to me so that I can see that you did it, so that I can see your beautiful illustrations. I want to see what you guys drew, okay? So this is the only work that you have to do for today. Just watch the video and complete page 89, all right? So I hope you guys have a great morning, and I will see you later today for phonics. Bye, guys.